A boy showed up at my apartment bleeding and said, "My brother locked me out, but I heard gunshots." When police arrived, they found 3 bodies. The knocking started soft, then turned frantic. I was halfway through folding laundry when the sound pulled me to my apartment door. Through the peephole, I saw a boy maybe 13 years old with blood running down his arm and soaking through his white t-shirt. His face was pale and streaked with tears. I yanked the door open and he stumbled forward. "My brother locked me out, but I heard gunshots inside. Please help. I think something terrible happened." His voice cracked on the last word. I pulled him into my apartment and grabbed my phone. My hands shook as I dialed 911. The operator answered, and I told her a child showed up bleeding, saying there were gunshots at his house. She asked for the address. The boy gave it through gasping breaths. 1847 Maple Grove, apartment 4B, directly above mine. I grabbed a kitchen towel and pressed it against his arm. The blood kept coming. "What's your name?" I asked while the operator told me officers were 3 minutes away. "Caleb. Caleb Reeves. My brother Ethan is 15. We were arguing and he shoved me outside and locked the door. Then I heard the shots. 3 of them. Loud. I tried to get back in, but the door wouldn't open. I was so scared, I ran down here because I saw your light on." His teeth were chattering despite the warm evening. I asked if his parents were home. He nodded. "Mom and Dad were both there. And Ethan. Please, you have to help them." The operator asked me to stay on the line and keep Caleb calm. She said not to go upstairs under any circumstances. 2 patrol cars arrived within 4 minutes. I heard the sirens and then boots pounding up the stairs. Caleb tried to follow them, but I held him back. "You need to stay here. Let them handle it." He was shaking so hard I thought he might collapse. I sat him on my couch and kept pressure on his arm. The wound looked deep, but not arterial. Through my ceiling I heard shouting, heavy footsteps, radio chatter, then silence. The kind of silence that feels wrong. An officer came down 10 minutes later. His face was gray. He asked if Caleb was the son from apartment 4B. I said yes. The officer knelt in front of Caleb and his voice was gentle but firm. "Son, I need you to tell me exactly what happened tonight. Start from the beginning." Caleb's story came out in broken pieces. He and Ethan had been fighting over something stupid, a video game. Ethan had anger problems, always had. He'd been getting worse lately, more violent, more unpredictable. Their parents were trying to get him help, but nothing worked. Tonight, Ethan exploded over Caleb touching his controller, shoved Caleb toward the door. Caleb shoved back. Ethan grabbed him and threw him into the hallway, locked the deadbolt. Caleb banged on the door and yelled. That's when he heard his father's voice raised, then his mother screaming, then 3 gunshots in rapid succession. Caleb ran, didn't know where to go. Saw my lights on and remembered his mother mentioning the nice woman in 3B who always smiled in the hallway. The officer's radio crackled. He stood and walked to the corner of my living room, spoke in low tones I couldn't hear. When he came back, his expression was harder. "Caleb, I need to know if your brother has access to firearms." Caleb's eyes went wide. "Dad keeps a gun in his nightstand, a pistol, for protection. Mom hated it. They fought about it all the time. Ethan knew where it was. Is he okay? Are my parents okay?" The officer didn't answer directly. "Paramedics are upstairs now. Detective Lyons is on her way. She'll need to talk to you. This young man needs medical attention too." He gestured at Caleb's arm. An ambulance had arrived. The EMTs came in and started treating Caleb's wound. It was a deep laceration from hitting the doorframe when Ethan threw him out. Needed stitches, but not life-threatening. Detective Lyons arrived 30 minutes later. She was maybe 40 with short dark hair and tired eyes that suggested she'd seen too much. She sat across from Caleb and me in my small living room. "Caleb, I'm very sorry to tell you this. Your parents and your brother are dead. All 3 of them. We found them in the apartment. Your father and mother in the kitchen. Your brother in the hallway near the front door. The preliminary investigation suggests your brother shot your parents then turned the gun on himself." Caleb made a sound that wasn't quite human. He folded in half and sobbed into his hands. I put my arm around his shoulders and felt him shaking apart. Detective Lyons waited. Let him cry. Then continued with questions that needed answers despite the horror. "Did Ethan have a history of violence?" Caleb nodded through his tears. "He hurt animals when he was younger. Killed our cat 3 years ago. Said it was an accident, but I saw him do it. Mom and Dad took him to doctors, therapists. They tried medication, but Ethan stopped taking it. Said it made him feel weird. He got into fights at school. Got suspended twice this year. He scared me sometimes. The way he looked at people. At me. But I never thought he'd do this. Never." Detective Lyons wrote everything down. "Did he ever threaten your parents?" Caleb hesitated. "Last month, he told Dad he wished he was dead. Dad had taken away his phone for getting expelled. Ethan screamed that Dad was ruining his life. That everyone would be better off without Dad around." Mom started crying. Ethan just went to his room. I listened to all of this feeling sick. This boy had been living with a ticking time bomb. His parents had known. They'd tried to get help. But the system had failed them. Failed Caleb. Failed Ethan too in some way. Detective Lyons asked about other family. Caleb said his grandmother lived in Portland. His Aunt Sophie was in Seattle. Both his parents were only children, so there weren't many relatives. Detective Lyons said she'd contact them. Child Protective Services would need to get involved. Caleb would need somewhere to stay tonight. I spoke up before thinking. He can stay here, just for tonight, until family arrives. Detective Lyons looked at me with that measuring expression cops develop. What's your relationship to this family? I explained I was just a neighbor. Barely knew them. Caleb's mother had introduced herself once in the laundry room. That was it. Detective Lyons made phone calls. Ran a background check on me. I was clean. No record. Stable job as a graphic designer. No red flags. She approved the temporary arrangement with the understanding CPS would be contacted first thing in the morning. She took detailed statements from both of us. Asked me what I'd heard tonight. I said nothing. My TV had been on. I hadn't heard the gunshots at all. Just Caleb's knocking. She asked Caleb more questions about the timeline. He'd been outside maybe 5 minutes between being locked out and hearing the shots. Then another 2 minutes of panicking before he ran downstairs. The crime scene team would piece together exact sequence. She told Caleb not to go home. It was a crime scene. He couldn't retrieve any belongings yet. Maybe in a few days. After everyone left, it was just Caleb and me in my apartment. He sat on my couch staring at nothing. I didn't know what to say. What do you say to a 13-year-old who just lost everything? I made him tea. He didn't drink it. I found a spare blanket and pillow. Set up the couch for him. He asked if he could take a shower. The blood on his arm had dried brown. I gave him a clean t-shirt and sweatpants. Heard him crying in the bathroom with the water running. When he came out, his face was raw and swollen. He lay down on the couch and pulled the blanket over his head. I turned off most of the lights. Left one lamp on in case he woke up scared. Sat in my armchair and watched him. Made sure he was breathing. Made sure this was real. A few hours ago, this kid had a family. Now he had nothing. I didn't sleep. Kept thinking about what happened upstairs. Kept imagining those final moments. Caleb's parents realizing their son was pointing a gun at them. The terror. The betrayal. Ethan pulling the trigger 3 times. Then turning the gun on himself. He was 15 years old. A child. Something had broken in him so fundamentally that murder-suicide felt like an answer. I thought about warning signs. The dead cat. The violence. The threats. His parents had seen them. Had tried to intervene. But you can't force someone into treatment unless they're in immediate danger. And by the time Ethan became an immediate danger, it was too late. The system was designed to protect individual rights even when those rights led to death. Caleb woke up screaming at 3 in the morning. I rushed over. He was tangled in the blanket, fighting it, eyes wild. It's okay. You're safe. You're in my apartment. It's Naomi. You're safe. I repeated it until his breathing slowed. He looked at me in the dim light. I dreamed it didn't happen. That I went home and everyone was fine. Then I woke up and remembered. His voice was small and broken. I asked if he wanted water. He nodded. I got him a glass and sat on the edge of the coffee table while he drank. Do you want to talk about anything? He shook his head. Can you just stay here? I don't want to be alone. I pulled the armchair closer and sat. Told him I wasn't going anywhere. He lay back down and I watched him until his breathing evened out again. Morning came gray and cold. I made coffee and toast. Caleb ate a few bites. A CPS caseworker named Jerome Price arrived at 8. He was kind but efficient. Explained that Caleb's grandmother had been contacted. She was driving down from Portland and would arrive by afternoon. In the meantime, Caleb needed to come to the CPS office for evaluation and paperwork. Caleb asked if he could get some of his things from upstairs. Jerome said not yet. Crime scene was still being processed. Maybe tomorrow. Caleb's face crumpled. I don't have anything. No clothes, no phone, nothing. I told him I'd buy him some basics. Jerome said that was generous, but CPS had emergency funds. I insisted. This kid had been through enough. Let me do something useful. After they left, I went to Target. Bought Caleb clothes, toiletries, a backpack. Spent $200 I hadn't budgeted for, but didn't care. Came back and cleaned my apartment. Tried to make it feel less like a crime scene adjacent space. My phone rang around noon. Detective Lyons. She had follow-up questions. Could I come to the station? I drove over. The police station smelled like bad coffee and desperation. Detective Lyons took me to an interview room, asked me to walk through last night again. I did. She asked if I'd noticed anything unusual about the Reeves family in recent weeks. Any arguments I'd overheard? Any concerning behavior? I said no. I worked from home but kept to myself. Didn't really know my neighbors. She showed me photos of the crime scene. I wish she hadn't. The images were nightmare fuel. Caleb's parents sprawled in their kitchen. Blood spatter on the walls. The father had defensive wounds. He'd tried to fight back. The mother had been shot in the chest and head. Quick death, hopefully. Ethan was in the hallway face down. Gun still in his hand. Single shot to the temple. Detective Lyons pointed out details. The father's gun safe had been broken into months ago. They'd found marks on it consistent with a crowbar. Ethan had stolen the pistol and hidden it in his room. The parents never reported it missing. Probably didn't check. That detail made me angry. They'd kept a gun in a house with a violent teenage son and never noticed when he stole it. Detective Lyons said they found Ethan's journal in his room. She couldn't share details but said it was disturbing. He'd been planning something for weeks. I asked about Caleb, how he was doing. Detective Lyons said his grandmother had picked him up. They were at a hotel. Caleb would stay with her in Portland, start therapy, try to process. She said Caleb was lucky he'd been locked out. If he'd been inside when Ethan snapped, he'd be dead too, either shot by his brother or caught in the violence. That thought sat heavy. Caleb's life had been saved by a locked door and a stupid argument over a video game. Inches and seconds between alive and dead. I went home feeling hollowed out, stood in my apartment and stared at the ceiling, knowing what had happened directly above me, knowing I'd never heard a thing. How was that possible? 3 gunshots and I'd heard nothing. The TV had been on, but still. I felt guilty for not hearing, for not helping, even though I knew logically there was nothing I could have done. Days passed. The crime scene tape came down. A cleaning crew went in. Took 3 days to sanitize the apartment. I saw them carrying out bags of contaminated materials. Carpet, drywall, everything soaked in blood. The building manager put up a notice that apartment 4B would be renovated before being re-rented. I wondered who would want to live there, knowing 3 people died violently inside. The news covered the story. Local tragedy, family murder-suicide. Ethan's school photo was on TV. He looked like a normal kid. Crooked smile, messy hair. You couldn't see the darkness behind his eyes in a frozen image. The news interviewed neighbors. Everyone said the same things. Quiet family, kept to themselves. Never suspected. Of course they never suspected. Monsters don't advertise. Caleb's grandmother called me 2 weeks later. Said Caleb wanted to talk to me. Asked if I'd be willing to visit them in Portland. I said yes. Drove up on a Saturday. They were staying with her in a small house near Laurelhurst. Caleb looked smaller than I remembered. Thinner. His arm was healing, but you could see the scar. He hugged me when I arrived. We sat in the backyard while his grandmother gave us space. Caleb told me about therapy. About nightmares. About how he couldn't stop replaying that night. I keep thinking if I'd just let Ethan have the controller, none of this would have happened. If I hadn't fought with him. If I'd stayed calm. I stopped him. Caleb, this is not your fault. What Ethan did had nothing to do with a video game. He was sick. He'd been planning this. You couldn't have stopped it. Caleb cried. I let him. When he calmed down, he asked about the apartment building. If people knew what happened. I told him the truth. Everyone knew. It was all over the news. He asked if I thought he was crazy for wanting to get some of his things from the apartment. His mother's necklace. His father's watch. Photos. Memories. I said that wasn't crazy at all. Those things mattered. Detective Lyons had told me personal belongings not considered evidence would be released soon. I offered to collect them for Caleb. Spare him from going back. He looked relieved. Would you? I can't go back there. I can't see it. I promised I would. His grandmother thanked me. Said I was the only good thing that came from that horrible night. That Caleb felt safe with me. That meant something. The detective called a month after the murders. Personal effects were ready for pickup. I went to the station and signed paperwork. They gave me 3 boxes, clothes, photos, jewelry, small items that had belonged to Caleb's parents. I drove them to Portland. Caleb opened the boxes with shaking hands. Found his mother's necklace, his father's watch, a photo album from when they were all younger. Ethan was in the photos, smiling, playing with Caleb. They'd been brothers once, before something broke. Caleb stared at a photo of the 4 of them at the beach. I missed them, even Ethan. Is that wrong? I told him no. Missing who Ethan used to be wasn't wrong. Missing his parents wasn't wrong. He was allowed to grieve. All of it was grief. The investigation concluded 6 weeks after the murders. Detective Lyons released the final report. Ethan had been diagnosed with conduct disorder at age 12, had shown signs of antisocial personality disorder emerging. His parents had pursued treatment, but Ethan refused to engage. The therapist who'd seen him twice before Ethan stopped going had recommended inpatient psychiatric evaluation. The parents had considered it, but ultimately decided against forcing him. They'd hoped he'd grow out of it. That medication and outpatient therapy would be enough. It wasn't. Ethan's journal contained detailed violent fantasies. He'd written about killing his parents for months. The entry dated the day of the murders said he was tired of them trying to control him, tired of disappointing them, easier to end it all, take them with him. Caleb had been spared by luck. Ethan hadn't intended to leave him alive, just hadn't gotten the chance. Reading that report broke something in me. This had been preventable. If Ethan had been hospitalized, if the system had intervened more forcefully, if his parents had taken the therapist's recommendation seriously. But they hadn't. They'd chosen to keep their family intact, to avoid the stigma of psychiatric hospitalization, to hope for the best. And it had cost them everything. I thought about Caleb, about how he'd carry this forever. The knowledge that his brother had planned to kill him too. That survival had been accidental. How do you process that? How do you move forward? I called Caleb that night, told him I'd read the report, asked how he was handling it. He said his therapist told him not to read it, but he'd found it online, knew what Ethan had written. He wanted to kill me too. I wasn't special. I was just locked out. I drove to Portland again, unplanned. Couldn't let him sit with that alone. Found him in his grandmother's backyard staring at nothing. Sat next to him. Ethan was sick, Caleb. Whatever he wrote in that journal was the sickness talking. The brother who played video games with you and took you to movies, that was real too. Both things existed in him. The illness won. But the brother you loved was real. Caleb asked how I could be sure. I said I couldn't. But choosing to remember the good wasn't denial. It was survival. He nodded slowly, asked if I thought he'd turn out like Ethan, if it was genetic, if he should be afraid of himself. I grabbed his hand. You are not your brother. You feel guilt and empathy and pain. Those are things Ethan couldn't feel anymore. That's how you know you're different. School started in the fall. Caleb enrolled in a Portland high school. His grandmother said it was rough. He got bullied. Kids found out about his family, called him the murder kid, said his brother was a psycho, asked if Caleb would snap too. He got into a fight defending himself, got suspended. His grandmother hired a lawyer, threatened the school with a lawsuit for failing to protect him. The bullying stopped publicly, continued privately. Caleb started eating lunch in the counselor's office, coming home with bruises he claimed were from gym class. His grandmother knew better. She pulled him out, enrolled him in online school, said it was better this way, safer. I worried it isolated him more. But what choice was there? Traditional school had failed him. I visited monthly, became a fixture in Caleb's life. Not a parent, not family. Something in between. Someone who'd been there the worst night of his life and hadn't left. He started calling me when he had nightmares. 3 in the morning my phone would ring. I'd answer every time. Talk him through the panic. Remind him he was safe. His grandmother said I was helping more than the therapist. That Caleb trusted me in ways he couldn't trust anyone else. I didn't know what to do with that responsibility. Didn't want to fail him. He'd had enough people fail him. But I showed up. Every month. Every late-night call. Every text that said he couldn't breathe. I showed up. A year after the murders, Caleb asked if I'd go with him to visit the graves. His parents were buried in Portland. Ethan was cremated. Ashes scattered somewhere his grandmother wouldn't tell Caleb. She thought it was better if Caleb didn't have a place to visit Ethan, to grieve him. I disagreed, but it wasn't my decision. We went to the cemetery on the anniversary. Caleb brought flowers, knelt at his parents' shared headstone. I'm sorry I fought with Ethan that night. I'm sorry I couldn't stop this. I'm sorry you're gone. His voice cracked. I knelt beside him, put my hand on his shoulder. They knew you loved them. They knew. We sat there for an hour. Caleb talked to them, told them about school, about his grandmother, about me, introduced me as his friend, the person who saved him. I didn't feel like I'd saved anyone. Caleb turned 15, the age Ethan had been when he died. The milestone hit hard. Caleb became withdrawn, stopped calling. His grandmother said he was spiraling, refused to get out of bed, stopped doing schoolwork. She didn't know how to help him. I drove to Portland, let myself in, found Caleb in his room, curtains drawn, lights off. He was staring at the ceiling. I sat on the edge of his bed. Talk to me. He said he didn't deserve to be alive, that Ethan should have killed him that night, that he was worthless, damaged, would never be normal. I let him say it all. Then I told him something I'd never shared, about my brother who died in a car accident when I was 16, how I'd survived and he hadn't, how I'd carried guilt for years, how therapy and time had taught me that survivor's guilt was normal but wrong, that being alive wasn't something to apologize for. Caleb looked at me, really looked for the first time in months. You understand? I said yes. I understood. The guilt. The why me. The feeling that you're living a life that should belong to someone else. But you keep living anyway. You honor them by living. By choosing joy when you can find it. By not letting the tragedy define everything you are. Caleb started crying. Real crying. Not the silent tears he usually shed. He cried for an hour while I held him. His grandmother found us like that. Thanked me silently. That night, Caleb ate dinner. Showered. Did his homework. Small steps. But steps. His therapist said he'd had a breakthrough, that my intervention had reached him when nothing else could. I didn't feel heroic, just grateful he was still here. 2 years after the murders, Caleb graduated high school. Online diploma, but still a diploma. He'd been accepted to community college in Portland, would study computer science. His grandmother threw him a small party. I drove up for it. Caleb looked different, taller, filled out, still carried sadness in his eyes, but also determination. He thanked me in front of everyone, said I'd saved his life that night and every night since. That he wouldn't be here without me. I cried. Couldn't help it. This kid had survived hell, was building a life anyway. That was courage. That was resilience. His grandmother hugged me, said I was family now, whether I liked it or not. I liked it. The civil lawsuit settled 3 years after the murders. Caleb's grandmother had sued the therapist who'd recommended inpatient evaluation, but hadn't followed up. Sued the school for failing to report Ethan's violent behavior. Sued the gun manufacturer for unclear safety warnings. Most claims were dismissed. The therapist's insurance settled for a modest amount. Not enough to matter financially, but enough to acknowledge wrongdoing. The school settled too. Implemented new protocols for identifying at-risk students. Named them after Caleb's parents. The Reeves Protocol. Mandatory reporting. Immediate intervention. Caleb said it felt hollow. His parents were still dead. Ethan was still dead. But maybe it would save someone else. Maybe that counted for something. Caleb started working part-time at a tech company while taking classes. Met a girl named Peyton at work. She knew about his past. He'd told her everything on their third date. Expected her to run. She stayed. Said his past didn't define him. His choices did. They started dating seriously. His grandmother approved. said Peyton was good for him, made him smile. I met her during one of my visits. She was kind and funny and didn't treat Caleb like he was broken. That mattered. Caleb needed people who saw him as whole, not just as a victim, not just as the brother of a killer, just as Caleb, a person with scars but also dreams, a future, hope. 4 years after the murders, I got a call from Detective Lyons. She'd retired from the force but wanted to tell me something. A cold case had been solved using evidence from Ethan's journal. He'd confessed to killing a neighborhood cat 2 years before he killed his family. The cat had belonged to an elderly woman who'd reported it missing, filed a police report. The case went cold. Ethan's journal entry described torturing the cat, hiding the body, feeling nothing. The woman had died last year, never knowing what happened. Detective Lyons said they'd found the cat's remains based on Ethan's description, gave the woman's family closure. She thought I'd want to know that Ethan's darkness had been documented, that the signs had been there all along, that Caleb had been living with a monster, had survived by sheer luck. I told Caleb about the cat. He remembered it, remembered Ethan coming home that night with scratches on his arms, said the neighbor's cat had attacked him. Their parents had believed him, never questioned, never checked. Caleb said he'd suspected even then, had felt something was wrong, but he'd been 11 years old. What was he supposed to do? I told him nothing. He'd been a child. The adults should have protected him, should have seen the signs, should have acted. They hadn't. The system had failed. The family had failed. Ethan had been failed too. Born with something broken in his brain, given access to weapons, not given adequate intervention. It was a cascade of failures. Everyone responsible. No one held accountable except the 3 people who died. Caleb finished community college, transferred to Portland State University, majored in psychology, said he wanted to understand what happened to Ethan, wanted to help other families recognize warning signs, prevent future tragedies. His grandmother said she was proud, that he'd taken his trauma and turned it into purpose. I was proud too. He'd survived, was thriving, building a life. Peyton graduated the same year. They moved in together. Small apartment in Southeast Portland. Caleb called me the day they moved in, said he was happy, really happy, that he hadn't thought he'd ever feel this way again. I cried on the phone, told him he deserved happiness, deserved peace. He'd earned it. 5 years after the murders, the apartment building where it happened was sold. New owners. Renovated completely. The manager who'd been there that night retired. New tenants had no idea what happened in 4B. I'd moved too. Different building, different neighborhood. Couldn't stay there anymore. Couldn't walk past that apartment every day. Caleb understood. Said he wouldn't want to live there either. We met for coffee one Saturday. He brought Peyton. Told me they were engaged. Showed me the ring. Simple. Elegant. Asked if I'd come to the wedding. I said obviously. He asked if I'd walk him down the aisle. His grandmother would be there, but he wanted me up front. Wanted me to give him away. I was crying again. Said yes. Of course, yes. The wedding was small. Just family and close friends. I wore a blue dress. Walked Caleb down the aisle. Handed him off to Peyton. Watched them exchange vows. Saw him smile. Really smile. Without shadows. Without weight. Just joy. Pure joy. His grandmother squeezed my hand during the ceremony. Whispered thank you. I whispered back that Caleb had done this himself. We'd just been there. Shown up. That's all anyone needs sometimes. Someone to show up. During the reception, Caleb gave a speech. Thanked everyone. Talked about his parents. About how they'd loved him. How he'd survived because someone had knocked on a stranger's door and that stranger had answered. He raised his glass to me. Everyone clapped. I cried. Again. Always crying at this kid's milestones. 6 years after the murders, I got a call from Caleb. He and Peyton were expecting a baby girl, due in March. He was terrified and excited. Asked if I'd be the godmother. Said he wanted his daughter to know me. To know the person who'd saved her father. I said yes. Started knitting a blanket. Pink and yellow. Soft. Their daughter was born healthy. 8 pounds. Full head of dark hair. They named her Naomi. After me. I held her in the hospital and felt something settle in my chest. This child existed because I'd answered my door 6 years ago. Because I'd helped a bleeding boy. Because I'd stayed when I could have walked away. She was proof that trauma doesn't always win. That survival is possible. That joy can grow from ashes. Caleb brought Naomi to visit monthly. She learned to crawl in my living room. Took her first steps holding my hands. Called me Nomi because she couldn't say Naomi yet. I watched her grow. Watched Caleb be a father. Gentle, patient, present. Everything his own father had tried to be. Everything Ethan had destroyed. But Caleb was building something new. Breaking cycles. Creating safety. His daughter would never know violence in her home. Would never wonder if her family was dangerous. She'd know love, stability, peace. That was Caleb's gift to her. His triumph over his past. 7 years after the murders, I attended a symposium on family violence prevention. Caleb was speaking. He'd finished his master's degree in clinical psychology. Was working with at-risk youth, families with violent children. He told his story on stage. The video game argument, the locked door, the gunshots, finding help, surviving. He talked about warning signs, about early intervention, about the importance of taking threats seriously, about how his parents had tried but hadn't tried hard enough, about how the system had failed his family, about how things needed to change. The audience was silent. Then they stood and applauded. Caleb had turned his nightmare into advocacy, into action, into something that mattered. After his speech, we went to dinner, just the two of us. He thanked me again for answering the door that night. I told him he didn't need to keep thanking me. He said he'd never stop, that I'd given him a second chance at life, given him hope when everything was dark, given him a reason to keep going. I said he'd done that himself. I'd just been there. He smiled, said sometimes being there is everything. Sometimes it's enough. We talked about the future, about Naomi, about his work, about how far he'd come, about how proud his parents would be, about how even Ethan in his better moments would be proud, about healing, about moving forward while carrying the past, about surviving. The anniversary comes every year. Caleb always calls. We talk about his parents, about Ethan, about that night, about everything that came after. It gets easier. Not easy. Never easy. But easier. The weight becomes bearable. The memories less sharp. The grief less consuming. Caleb has a full life now. A family. A career. Purpose. He's not defined by what happened to him. He's defined by what he chose to do after. That's the real story. Not the tragedy, not the trauma, the survival, the choice to keep living, to build something good from something terrible, to answer the door when someone knocks, to show up, to stay. That's the story. That's what matters. Years pass, and Caleb's daughter asks about her grandparents, about the uncle she never met. Caleb tells her age-appropriate truths, that her grandparents loved him very much, that her uncle was sick, that sometimes people get sick in ways we can't see, that it's important to ask for help, to tell someone when you're scared or sad or angry, that feelings are okay but actions matter. She listens with wide eyes, asks if he's sad. He says yes, always a little sad, but also happy, because he has her, because he has mommy, because he has Nomi, because life goes on and brings good things even after terrible things. She hugs him and he holds her tight, grateful, present, alive. That's enough. More than enough. That's everything. If you enjoyed this, you'll definitely want to see the next ones too. So subscribe now and let me know your take in the comments.